Hey everyone, I just wanted to make a short podcast about water quality. Water quality was one of the first things that I started researching when I was first getting into things like health, and I learned a lot of information that I wanted to share with people in it. Uh, so, just to start with, tap water and a lot of other types of water most people drink, especially in the United States, contains a lot of nasty things in this. This includes, but is not limited to, um, microbial contaminants like bacteria and viruses, which can come from things like sewage leaks or failing septic systems or farm waste runoff. There's inorganic chemicals, which includes things like metals, minerals, nitrates. So this would include things like lead, arsenic, mercury, and other things, which can also come from old plumbing or industrial waste or even natural deposits of things. There's also farm fertilizers and, again, septic systems that can run off into the water supply, which can cause a lot of problems. There's also organic chemicals, which include things like volatile organic compounds, VOCs, and these are usually things like industrial solvents or gasoline components. And this can enter from spills or leaking tanks or even landfills. And on top of that, there's pesticides and herbicides in this, and forever chemicals or PFAS, PFAS, uh, which are now have been shown in research to cause a lot of problems, including things like cancer. Uh, on top of that, there's the disinfectants you get from water treatment facilities, which use things like chlorine or chloramine to kill germs, but at the same time, you're not really supposed to take that in. Finally, there's things like pharmaceutical drugs or personal care products. So things like medications, hormones. That includes things like antibiotics, SSRIs, birth control, and stuff like that. That can end up in your water supply. So you might not want to be drinking that unless you're intending to, I suppose. So there's it's pretty simple to fix overall, but there's some things you have to consider. You have to filter it, and there's generally the first thing I looked for was contaminants removed. Uh, the way I was able to find this out was through laboratory testing of different companies and certifications they got. Not every company certifies their products, but I generally like to see it to get third party confirmation. It can be expensive, so that's why some companies may not. But on the other side of that coin, it might also be because their products don't actually live up to the expectations they claim. So there's a few different bodies that do this generally for home products. NSF um, does this, and they have standards such as 42, 53, and 58, which I'll talk about in a minute. There's also the Water Quality Association, or WQA, which tests it to NSF standards. And there's also IAPMO, which also does certify a lot of different things. The three common ones I looked for when I was looking at NSF certifications were 42, 53, and 58. 42 covers aesthetic effects, so things like the odor, the taste, and um, chlorine and other things like that. And it's common to see that in pitchers or faucet filters or even fridge filters. NSF 53 was for things like that, those volatile organic compounds, some types of metals, some forever chemicals or PFAS. And then there was NSF 58, which just applies to reverse osmosis systems, and that talks about contaminant reduction overall. Some of the other things I noticed to consider with it was the ease of use, both installing it as well as changing the filters, as well as the actual cost and replacement of the filters, because some can be super expensive, whereas some might be more cost efficient. And the location. So some people might be in an apartment where they don't want to drill into a wall or something like that when they want to put up something like a reverse osmosis. Of course, you can get tankless systems and ones that don't drill, uh, but that's just something to note. Pitchers are obviously smaller in size usually and are cheaper, but I noticed for some of them the filter price per changing was actually more expensive than just getting like an RO system. The other thing to note there is the RO system I found next to distilling water seemed to reduce the most amount of contaminants, just because it pushes things through at a high pressure for reverse osmosis. So that's what I ended up going with personally, and I noticed the water quality was significantly better. Um, but it is a little more expensive. So I started out with a pitcher and moved to an RO system. There's a bunch of different companies in this space. I looked at the Perfect Water, APEC Water, Express Water, and Water Drop Filter for reverse osmosis systems, but there's other companies out there that I'm sure do a good job too. And for pitchers, I looked at Zero Water and Clearly Filtered, um, and those seem to be okay as well. The other thing to note, besides just the drinking water that you're getting, is you probably want a shower filter. Some people definitely notice this. Like I noticed this before with water quality, where my skin got itchy after a shower where it wasn't filtered, and that could have been because of, for example, the chlorine in it. So that can be another area you definitely want to filter water in. It's not, I wouldn't say it's as good of a water filter usually as something like a reverse osmosis, but it's still better than nothing, certainly, to have a shower filter. The other thing I noted was just some of the generic brands that I saw out there, or common cheap brands for water pitchers and things like that, like Brita filters that you can go buy at any store for pretty cheap. Uh, it definitely didn't filter water the best, and it just didn't seem as effective, in my opinion. There was also Berkey, which is a pretty popular one I've seen in survival type spaces where it's really popular with individuals. I wasn't as big of a fan because when I looked at it, it wasn't certified in anything, as well as I heard reports of aluminum ending up in people's water from it, which is obviously a no-no. So yeah, I recommend filtering your water. It definitely helps you feel better drinking higher quality water, and it's not too expensive over the long run, especially if you invest in like a good reverse osmosis system and install it yourself. So yeah, I'll include some interesting sources and links below this that you should check out. One of them, for example, is actually a place where if you're in the United States, you can look up based on your zip code and see the water quality reports that what contaminants are in your water, really, and that's really interesting, and that can help influence your decision of what type of filter you might want to go with. So yeah, that's about all.